Surprise, surprise, it looks like we were lied to yet again, with the FBI appearing to have investigations into President Trump open before Operation Crossfire Hurricane began. What are your thoughts on these communications?
Well, first of all, it's not a surprise to those of us who have been covering this. This is not, it could be a surprise to some people, but not to us. Representative Devin Nunes has also suggested in his interviews over the past few years that this investigation started far before the official date of July 31st, 2016. So now we do know that they were already investigating. This counterintelligence probe had been opened up. Look here, it's really important for people to understand what was happening the last 2 week of July. So the DNC's convention was completely up for grabs because the DNC emails had been released by WikiLeaks, which showed that the party had rigged the primary system in favor of Hillary Clinton. That was going on. The Bernie Bros were livid, understandably. It led to the resignation of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the head of the DNC. So the party was really in disarray. What happened that week is people like Robbie Mook, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, the media, Glenn Simpson from Fusion GPS, according to his own book, traveled to Philadelphia that week to try to spin the story. He had parts of the dossier with him. He met with top journalists in Philadelphia, including the editor of the New York Times, and attempted to pivot journalists' media's attention away from the debacle that was the DNC and move it over to this idea that the Russians had hacked the DNC server and also that the Trump campaign was colluding with the Kremlin. Of course, that worked. The media was happy to run with a totally different story. That was really the birth of the collusion, Russian collusion hoax.
And from rigged Democrat primaries, it's not so much of a stretch to say rigged 2020 election that we're looking at right now, as you and I have discussed now. But these new declassified communications, do they shift the timeline then at all? Because what we always heard was George Papadopoulos, that his comments are what sparked the whole thing, that until that point that the FBI was, doing its due diligence, and it wasn't until Papadopoulos spoke that then they, felt compelled to do their national duty and look into this. How does these communications change that sort of timeline?
I mean, it totally blows it out of the water, which of course was never credible to begin with. I revisited the infamous New York Times article, December of 2017, that outlined how the drunken encounter between George Papadopoulos and the UK diplomat, who then tipped off the FBI. He was so alarmed that George Papadopoulos was talking to Russian agents, which of course wasn't a Russian agent. He was also a plant, about Hillary's emails, and that launched Crossfire Hurricane. Never made any sense. Of course, what was happening also at the time, this late 2017, the Mueller investigation was, of course, coming up completely empty with collusion. Also, Devin Nunes was about to release his memo that outlined exactly where the dossier came from, that was funded by the Clinton campaign, and that they were trying to dispel, the media was trying to dispel the notion that the dossier had something to do with the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. None of it added up. I'm sure the New York Times is doing a lot of soul searching right now, why they published that article, and I'm sure we'll get lots of retractions and apologies.